I want you to picture a scene for a second. It's late afternoon.
Right.
You know, the light's getting that golden, sort of heavy quality. You're walking down a quiet suburban street, or maybe it's a narrow alleyway in the city. It's peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
You see a neighbor taking out the trash, or, I don't know, watering their plants. You lock eyes, you give that polite little wave.
The nod.
You say, hey, how's it going? They say, good, you. And then the doors close. Click.
Yeah, that scene, it plays out millions of times a day all over the world. It feels normal, safe.
It's the fabric of civilized society, isn't it?
It is.
Exactly. It's the standard operating procedure. But our source material for this deep dive, it takes that seemingly innocent moment, that click of the door, and just peels back the skin.
Mm-hmm.
It asks a question about that specific interaction that is honestly a bit haunting. It asks, if I'm friendly with my neighbors now, will I be bloody lonely when I get old?
And that question, it just cuts right through all the pleasantries. And the source argues that for most of us, if we're being honest, the answer is a hard no.
Which goes against everything we're taught. I mean, we're told pretty much from birth that we need to keep up this village affection.
Right, that whole idea of tin lang ya song.
Yes. It's sold to us almost like an insurance policy. You pay your premiums in waves and small talk now, so that later, when you're old and gray, you won't be isolated.
We operate under this belief that social activity just equals safety. That if we, accumulate enough nodding acquaintances, we're building a safety net.
But the twist in this deep dive is sharp. The source argues this is a dangerous illusion.
A really dangerous one. It suggests that being surrounded by neighbors, it doesn't cure loneliness. In fact, some of the loneliest people on Earth are living in the middle of crowded villages surrounded by people who know their names.
But don't know them.
Exactly.
And that's what makes this different from, say, a typical sociological discussion. This isn't just about social dynamics, it's an existential issue.
It is.
The source puts it so bluntly. Are we connecting because we actually care about these people, or because we are terrified of facing our own silence?
That's the core tension, isn't it?
Yeah.
We use community to hide from ourselves. We use the noise of others to drown out the questions we really don't want to answer.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because I think most listeners would say, wait a minute, humans are social animals, we need tribes.
Of course.
We are meant to be islands. So where does this fear actually come from? The source calls it a survival instinct disguised as morality.
I think that's a fascinating way to frame it, and it's biologically accurate. I mean, if you look back historically, the village wasn't just a social club.
No.
It was a serious survival system. If you got sick in, say, the year 1600, the village was your hospital. If there was a famine, the village was your food bank. Being left behind or kicked out, that wasn't just sad, it was a death sentence.
So even though I can order food on an app and call an ambulance on my phone, my lizard brain hasn't updated its software.
Not at all.
It's still screaming, don't get kicked out of the tribe. If they don't like you, you die.
Precisely. That ancient fear is running in the background of every HOA meeting and every block party. When we think about aging, that fear,
Yeah.
it morphs. It stops being about, will I get invited to the party, and starts being, will anyone know I'm dead?
Oh, wow.
Or will anyone knock on my door if I don't come out for 3 days? So we treat being neighborly as a way to soothe that survival instinct. We aren't necessarily looking for friends, we're looking for witnesses.
Witnesses to our existence. That is a heavy concept. But here is where the source makes a distinction that I think is critical for anyone listening to really get. It distinguishes between being near someone and being close to someone. Proximity versus intimacy.
And we confuse the two all the time. A neighbor can live on the other side of a single sheet of drywall for 30 years.
30 years.
You can hear them walk, hear their TV, smell their cooking. I mean, you are physically intimate with their routine. But they might not know a single fear you have. They don't know your history. They don't know what keeps you up at night.
30 years of physical closeness with zero emotional closeness. That's almost more lonely than living in the woods, isn't it?
It is. It's what the source calls the illusion of quantity. We count the heads around us and we think we're safe.
Yeah.
But the source argues that loneliness isn't measured by physical distance or the number of people in your zip code. It's measured by the level to which you feel seen.
Right.
You can be miles away from someone who understands you perfectly and feel connected, and inches away from a total stranger and feel completely isolated.
And that leads to what the source identifies as the fifth root of our fear, the fear of silence. This part, it hit me pretty hard. It suggests we use the noise of the neighborhood the greetings, the bustle, the lawnmowers, to fill up the silence in our own lives.
Because for so many people, silence is terrifying. The source argues that silence forces us to face our own inner emptiness.
There's no distraction.
None. If the street is quiet and the house is quiet, you are left alone with your thoughts. For many, that neighborly interaction is just a volume knob they turn up to drown out that internal monologue.
And if you don't turn that knob up, if you're the person who doesn't wave or keeps to themselves,
Then you get hit with the social stigma. We label those people eccentric, selfish, or just weird.
yeah,
And the source points out that we often connect with others not because we genuinely want to, but because we are terrified of being seen as abnormal. We perform community to avoid being labeled an outcast.
so it's peer pressure that follows us into retirement. We wave because we're afraid of what it means if we don't wave.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have this biological drive, this fear of silence. But let's fast forward to right now, to the modern era, because the way we neighbor has really changed.
Oh, completely. We aren't borrowing cups of sugar anymore. We're mostly digital.
Which brings us to what the source calls the second underground mechanism. We've shifted from physical presence to signals.
Signals.
Yeah, signals. You mean like social media likes, heart emojis, that kind of thing?
Exactly that. A like, a quick comment, a text message. These are very low-effort signals. They create the feeling of connection. They trigger a little dopamine hit. It feels like keeping in touch.
It does.
But the expert perspective here, and the source is very firm on this, is that signals cannot take care of you. A like cannot bring you a glass of water when you can't get out of bed.
Right.
A heart emoji cannot hold your hand while you wait for a diagnosis. You need a biological body in the room.
That is such a crucial distinction. We feel connected because our phone is buzzing, but physically, biologically, we're alone in the room. We've traded presence for notifications.
And even when we are physically present with neighbors, there's this polite trap. Relationships have become so formalized. We greet each other to be polite. But politeness, it creates a barrier. It's a shield. You can't show weakness or deep fear or vulnerability to someone you only maintain diplomatic relations with.
No, I can't exactly stop my neighbor while he's taking out the recycling and say, "Hey, Bob, I'm having a crippling existential crisis about my mortality today."
Right. You'd be like, okay. Recycled goes in the blue bin, man. Have a good one.
Exactly. It violates the social contract. And that formality keeps the relationship shallow. But there's a darker side to the modern village, too, which is the comparison culture.
Oh, definitely. The source highlights that these communities are often engines of surveillance and judgment.
Totally. It's the keeping up with the Joneses on steroids. Who has the nicer car? Whose lawn is dead?
Who has guests over and who doesn't? And because we fear that evaluation, we hide our true selves. So even in a crowded street, we're emotionally distancing ourselves to avoid judgment. We're wearing masks.
And you can't build true intimacy through a mask. You can only build an audience.
You're performing a life rather than sharing one.
There is a specific example in the source that I think just perfectly captures this modern failure. It's the group chat scenario.
I think everyone listening is probably in one of those.
For sure. A neighborhood or apartment complex WhatsApp group or a next door thread.
It's a painful anecdote because it feels so familiar. It exposes that gap between communication and community.
So it describes a modern apartment complex. They have a group chat that is buzzing all day, notifications popping off, jokes, complaints about parking, news about a lost cat. It feels like a vibrant, tight-knit community.
Right, it creates the illusion of a village. It feels like activity. It mimics connection.
But then the source says, imagine an elderly person in that building needs someone to just sit with them. Not to do anything, not to fix the plumbing.
Just to sit there.
Just to sit there for a few hours because they're scared or sick or grieving. And suddenly, the chat goes silent.
Or maybe you get a sad face reaction.
Exactly. But nobody knocks on the door.
That silence is the reality check. The source uses this to prove that a well-organized community does not equal a caring one. We have optimized communication. We can reach everyone instantly, but we have atrophied our capacity for staying power.
Staying power.
We are great at the quick ping, but terrible at the slow, heavy lifting of presence.
It's easy to send a text. It's hard to sit in a chair for 3 hours and smell the sickness and hear the clock ticking.
Correct. And that leads us right to the existential cost. If we keep buying into this myth that the neighbors will save us, what happens when we actually get old? What's the real price of this illusion?
The source calls this the unspoken contract, and it leads to a lot of bitterness.
A lot. People feel they invested in their neighbors by being nice for decades. They think, I waved, I was polite, I didn't play loud music, I brought cookies at Christmas.
Right. I did my part.
Exactly. They expect a return on that investment in the form of care or company when they get older. They view social capital like it's a savings account.
But the neighbors never signed that contract.
They did not. It was a unilateral fantasy. And when the return doesn't come, when the neighbors act like busy strangers or when new people move in who don't know the history, the person feels betrayed. They become bitter. But the even bigger cost, the truly existential cost, is that by betting on the community to save us, we delay our own inner work.
And this is the core of the whole argument, right? We're outsourcing our emotional stability.
Yes. We don't learn how to be alone without collapsing. We create this hidden dependency. We expect others to save us from our own emptiness. And the source is very philosophical here. It argues that any relationship tasked with saving you is destined to break.
It's too much weight.
Way too much weight to put on another person, let alone a casual neighbor.
It's like trying to build a foundation out of other people. If they move or change or die, your house just falls down.
Exactly. We trick ourselves with numbers. We think, I know 50 people on this street, I'm safe. The source calls this the illusion of quantity again. It gives this first example of a friendly old neighborhood where everyone says hi. But when someone falls ill, visitors might drop by for 5 minutes, stand awkwardly near the door, and then leave.
They go back to their lives.
They go back to their lives. Social interaction does not translate into staying power. Just because you know a lot of people doesn't mean you have anyone who can endure the difficulty of your aging process with you.
This is heavy. It's a bit of a wake-up call for anyone who thinks their social calendar is going to protect them from the realities of aging.
It is.
I feel like we need to pivot to solutions because otherwise this is just depressing. But the source warns us these are uncomfortable strategies.
They're uncomfortable because they require us to change our internal setting, not just our external behavior. This isn't a how-to guide on making friends. It's a how-to guide on being.
So step one isn't bake more cookies for the neighbors.
Definitely not.
Yep.
The first shift is to stop using connection as a shield. We have to stop using people to protect us from the fear of being alone.
Which leads to this idea of solitude as a skill. I love that phrasing.
Me too.
Usually we think of solitude as a state. You're either alone or you're not. But the source calls it a skill, something you have to practice.
It is a skill, and it's one we rarely teach. The expert view here is that you must learn to be steady in solitude before you connect with others. If you can't stand your own silence, if you panic the moment the room is quiet, your connections are just cries for help.
They're needy.
Very needy. You're consuming other people to fill a void.
So you have to be okay with yourself first. If you're okay with yourself, then hanging out with a neighbor is a choice, not a frantic attempt to avoid yourself.
Exactly. It changes the dynamic from desperation to freedom. When you aren't desperate for someone to acknowledge you, your interactions become genuine. You aren't extracting validation, you're sharing time.
You can wave at the neighbor because you like them, not because you need them to prove you exist.
Yes, and that leads to the strategy of quality over quantity. The source advises investing in a few deep relationships rather than a broad, safe network.
It's the sniper approach versus the shotgun approach.
It is. The source argues it is better to have one person, just one, who can sit in silence with you, who knows your darkness and your fears, than a whole street of people who just wave.
Because that one person represents intimacy. The street represents an audience. And in old age, when the lights go down, you don't need an audience. You need intimacy.
Precisely. The source also mentions boundaries, which seems counterintuitive. Usually people think avoiding loneliness means dropping boundaries and letting everyone in.
Right, that whole my door is always open kind of thing.
But the source says true connection requires boundaries. We need to separate community from personal life. You cannot dissolve yourself into the group.
What do you mean by that?
If you lose your identity to the collective, if you become just the guy at number 42 or the lady who runs the bake sale, you haven't found connection. You've just found camouflage. You need to exist as a distinct individual who chooses to connect.
And then the source drops what it calls question 10. This is the hard one. It feels like a test.
It is the ultimate existential test. We must ask ourselves, if no one is beside me, what reasons do I have to keep living?
Wow. Let's say that again. If no one is beside me, what reasons do I have to keep living?
It's brutal, but it's necessary. If your only reason for existing is the validation or presence of others, grandchildren, neighbors, spouses, you are in a very precarious position.
Because people leave.
People leave, people die, people get busy. Answering this question forces you to find meaning that is internal. Maybe it's a hobby, a passion, a spiritual practice, a love of nature, or just the enjoyment of your own mind. Whatever it is, it has to be yours.
Something that doesn't walk out the door when the neighbor goes home.
That's it.
That's a game changer. It means building a life that is interesting to you, regardless of who is watching. It's almost like being the protagonist of your own movie, even if it's an art house film with no dialogue.
I like that analogy, yes. You have to be interested in the script of your own life, even when there are no other actors on stage. And that brings us to the Source's vision of the Promised Land.
Yeah, let's talk about this, because usually when we picture a successful old age, we picture a commercial, a big birthday party, grandkids running around.
Neighbors dropping by with casseroles,
Yeah.
a full house,
Yeah,
noise, laughter.
that's the Hollywood version. But the Source paints a very different picture. It argues that the true Promised Land is not a house full of guests. It is a state of mind. It is a state where you do not panic when the day is quiet.
That's beautiful. It's not about popularity, it's about peace.
Right.
It's about redefining loneliness entirely. We usually think loneliness is a math problem. It's cured by adding people. The Source suggests loneliness is cured by improving the quality of the relationship you have with yourself.
If you like the person you're alone in the room with, you aren't lonely.
You're just in solitude.
It's the difference between being alone and being lonely.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Being alone is a physical state. Being lonely is an emotional reaction to that state. And the Source leaves us with this final lingering image. It's late afternoon again.
Same time of day as our opening scene.
Exactly. The room is empty. There is no knock on the door. It is silent.
But in this version, you aren't waiting. You aren't checking the window. You aren't feeling that pang of rejection.
You are there, simply existing. You are reading or thinking or just watching the light change, and you are okay with it.
You're not waiting for anyone to validate your existence.
You are enough.
That is such a powerful shift. It takes the power back. It stops us from being victims of a quiet phone or a quiet street.
It empowers us to live out of freedom, not fear. When you don't need the neighbor to knock, you can genuinely enjoy it if they do. But your happiness isn't held hostage by their schedule.
So to wrap this up, we started by asking if friendly neighbors are the insurance for a happy old age. And the answer seems to be no. They are a bonus, maybe a luxury.
But the real insurance is inside you.
Right.
The community is the garden, but you are the house. You have to make sure the house is sturdy, regardless of what's happening in the garden. If the garden withers or the weather changes, the house must stand.
I love that. So here is the provocative thought we want to leave you with today, building on everything we've discussed.
We spend our lives hoping for that knock on the door to alleviate our boredom or our fear. But ask yourself this: if the knock on the door never comes, do you have enough inside that room, inside your own mind, to keep you company?
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Take care.